introduction, I'll be talking about the Smart Lease Navigator. It's a solution that leverages RAG for efficient lease management. And like was mentioned, my name is Sujal Bhat. For our agenda, I'll just give a brief background about what property management is. Where do I think there is an optimization opportunity where LLMs and AI can help? And that's where my application, Smart Lease Navigator, comes into picture. We'll talk about that application, its architecture. We'll do a quick demo, and then to wrap it up, we'll talk about the roadmap for this application, and I'll open it up for questions. All right, so property management. I think most of us in one way, shape, or form may have dealt with property managers. If you have ever leased a home, rented an apartment, or if you are a property manager, you might have outsourced your work to a property management company to manage your house or your rental apartments, right? That's where property managers come into picture. They do a lot of things. They will be helping, they will be the point of contact for all of your tenant inquiries. So if you were a tenant, you wanted to find out some information, okay, if you're allowed to do certain things in your property, you'll contact the property manager and ask them about it. Or if you wanted some clarification on what your rent is, when is your rent due, you'll talk with your property management company or your property managers at the company. They also talk with billing coordinators to make sure that the bills are sent right, you're being charged the right rent, all the back end things that happen with billing, they are responsible for that. They again have to rely on the lease terms, making sure that they are legally following all the terms and conditions laid out in the lease. They're responsible for rent collection, so they might be dealing with collectors. And again, they have to reference the lease terms and conditions when they are dealing with rent collectors. They'll also be responsible for your repair and maintenance. So anything that's going on in your apartment, sometimes the property managers are responsible. Sometimes it's the tenant that is responsible for it, right? The lease is what calls out those differences where a tenant is responsible versus where the property managers are responsible. So all of that is laid out in the lease. They have to look at that. They also deal with renewals of your lease. And then whenever they are renting out the property, they might want to look at the old lease to see what the terms and conditions were. So there's a lot of work that our property managers do. And that's where I think there's an amazing opportunity for optimization. This is a loud and clear call for help from property managers that I personally know. When I rented out apartments in the past, I've worked with them. I know they do a lot of things, but I see them overwhelmed. So I see there's an optimization opportunity with AI in the picture now. We could really help them out and make jobs easier for them. And it's not just the property managers, right? It also helps the tenants, because when a tenant calls and if the property manager is immediately able to respond to them, your tenants are happy. So overall, it's a win-win situation, not just for the property managers, but for all the people that they serve. So tenants, billing coordinators, collection agencies, everybody that they deal with. And so the solution for that to help them out is the application that I'll be demoing today. I named it the Smart Lease Navigator. As you can see in the picture, right, that the Smart Lease Navigator is at the heart of the system. It is able to look at all the lease documents for different tenants and provide one consolidated view to our property manager to help our tenants out. So let's dive into a little bit of technical architecture. How does this application work? So it's a RAG-based system. It's an application. The first step, though, is to make sure that you're feeding your vector database with the leases, right, with the right documents. So the application has a UI wherein you'll upload your leases. So every time the property manager signs a new lease, they go through a process where they upload the lease. There's two main things that happen over here. When they upload the lease, they fill in the basic information, right? There's structured data that goes along with every lease, like what's your rent amount, when is your lease start date. All of that information is captured as part of the metadata that gets stored into the vector database. And then there's the lease itself, which is then we embed that and we store those embeddings into the quadrant database. So The technical architecture looks somewhat like this. The user would go in, our property manager would go in, add the lease, it gets stored into an Amazon S3 bucket in the backend. As soon as you load that data in the backend, it triggers a Lambda. The Lambda makes a call out. In this scenario, it's the OpenAI embedding model over here that I'm using, embeds the document, stores it along with the metadata into the content database. Here's a sample lease of how the document might look like. Here's how the actual code piece that is actually chunking the document and storing into the quadrant database. I'm using a simple text embedder. It's using the recursive character text splitter with a chunk size of 1000 and a chunk overlap of 200. Now, this is very simplistic. You could really enhance this further, but for our MVP, this suffices. The chunk overlap of 200 makes sure that I'm not missing out any important data. And then that's how we store it into the embedding database. Now let's get to the retrieval part, right? We have stored this data, all good. When a call comes into the property manager and they're trying to answer a question, here's how the flow would look like, right? As soon as the question comes in to our chatbot, what we have in the UI is a Chainlet application. Chainlet makes it very simple for us to build quick chatbots. It uses LangChain. LangChain provides a nice wrapper to talk with and interact with LLMs. So LangChain comes into the picture. LangChain would, with this particular RAG model, the first step is retrieval. We'll make a call out to the content database. But one thing we have to be careful is when you are answering, you want to answer that specific, you have to look at that specific tenant's lease. You don't want to, if John is calling, you don't want to give Jim's information to John, right? Or vice versa. So the first thing in our retrieval, and this is again very simplistic, you can enhance it further, but what I'm doing is I'm parsing out the tenant's name, like which tenant is this call for. Based on that, I make a call to the quadrant database to only get the data for that specific person. So you can see that filter over here. And once we have that specific person's filter, then our chain runs with a nice structured prompt. I'll show the prompt in a bit, and we get the response back. Right? Here's how the prompt looks like. I played with this prompt a little bit to get a very structured response. One thing that I didn't want is the LLM to hallucinate. So that's why you'll notice that I'm asking it to make sure that, hey, look at the metadata, the same metadata that we talked about. Some of the fields are in the metadata, the rent's in the metadata, the lease start date is in the metadata. Make sure you're looking at the metadata as well as the document. And based on both of them, make sure that there's no discrepancy. If there is, I wanted to highlight that. So that's why I'm asking it to highlight it. Based on the metadata data, it then asks the question, gets a response back. Go to the demo now and look at the live thing in action. So just for ease and in the interest of time, I asked you a few questions ahead of time. What's the lease policy for Daniel Brooks? So what it does, if you remember my flow, it's first going to parse that name, Daniel Brooks. It's going to look for Daniel Brooks policy. And then it's going to make sure, okay, it'll respond with an easy response back, like a user-friendly response. This is something I'm showing right now. Long term, I won't show this, but then it comes back with metadata. Did I find the information in metadata? Yes, no. And then it's actually sourcing, providing a link to that source as well, so that I can go and look at the full document. It's, if you'll notice over here in this portion, also extracting that particular exact source out so that you get exact information out. Here's another example where I'm asking for a rent. And this time you'll see that it's coming back with the information that there's no discrepancy between the metadata and the data, because it's looking at both metadata as well as data and it's finding the rent. And it's also sourcing the exact line in the document to tell you what the rent is. And you can always click this links and it'll open up that specific document. Interest of time, I'll move ahead. That was my demo. That was pretty much it. Longer term, this is my roadmap, right? What we saw was the MVP. Longer term, you can improve the UI. You can improve the app experience. You can provide lease reviews to make sure that the lease is following the right terms. You can make it agentic and integrated with city laws and all that to make sure that the leases are fair. And then, like I mentioned, this can also provide a tenant view. Open it up for questions. I think I'm right on time, so I'll open it up for questions over there.